intuitive fluidity with my Mars sweater. I may have had this sweater who knows how long, prominently about 6 years. Do you guys want to see the landscape or my ragged mug? I'll just kind of click it in, click it out, or whatever. I feel like the energy is more kind of locked in if you see me, to kind of see where I'm like at. But then it's cool to see like the surroundings. So what I'm gonna do today is just keep going forth as always, not really being too heady about it. And just kind of like clearing the misinterpretation, because we kind of like get confused sometimes within the comparison. Because sometimes with like, it's not that it's toxic or not toxic. It's there's just a lack of information, knowledge, and intelligence. One isn't necessarily better than another, you know. They have their own function, you know. The planets aren't necessarily better. One's not necessarily better than another. The gods aren't necessarily better than one another. The elements aren't necessarily better than one another. The organs aren't necessarily better than one another. They all have their place. But like, if you want to talk about the overall God, well, then I would see that it's the deeper organizer that's putting them and stabilizing them respectively together. But I don't really compare the gods or the elements. I don't really compare the elements, because post elements and how we're just kind of like, because everything respectively is something like a remix, you know, like not necessarily, but kind of is. And excuse me, like everything has its own place already, and how we kind of like are using that element for our character development, that's on our own ego journey. And the ego is not good or bad, it's just your character development. So what the sun is, I would say the sun is like, it has fifth house and first house qualities. Fifth house is your character development and your material evolution within, like, you know, other human specimens. And then the first house is how the fifth house could be exalted, and how you could see how your character has been exalted, and you could see how like other things are kind of like more at a different seeming level, not necessarily a competition level, but it's more of an intricate like personality level of like, this is like who, this is like what you have built yourself to be. This is what you are like kind of priming yourself to be. This is like, you know, where you find yourself like kind of like magnetizing wherever you are, you know, like however you get the first house. So I would say within this new moon, there's without a doubt strong like Jupiterian influence. And I say that because the ruler of Pisces is like Jupiter. So so within like that masculine admin cadmin body, you could say the sun, the first house is Pisces, you know. So like this sun, it's where the character development is being exalted. So it's like the fifth house and the first house is kind of like in the Pisces region respectively. The fifth house is in Pisces because the sun is in Pisces. So if the sun is in Pisces, The sun is bringing the fifth house, the character development. Where do we need to take our action? Where do we need to take our movement and our strategy for our own personal physical development? And how could that personal physical development, how could we exalt that into our like new selves? Because the fifth house it's the precursor to build and prime the first house. So if the sun is in Pisces, the fifth and the first house are in Pisces. So if the first house is in Pisces, then the ninth house would be in Scorpio, and the 12th house would be in Aquarius, because on the masculine admin cadmin body, the ninth house or Scorpio is the ninth house of Pisces first house. So that's the masculine admin cadmin body, and the 12th house, the feminine Jupiter aspect respectively, and the masculine Jupiter aspect, that whole propulsion of the masculine admin cadmin body, the ninth house is in Scorpio and the 12th house is in Aquarius. So everything, like every time, like so we're in something of like a quote unquote topsy turvy, flippy floppy end quote kind of like circumstantial energy dynamic, because we just got out of all of these Aquarian energies, and now Aquarius is in something of a 12th house. So it's Aquarius was in the first house and now it's in the 12th house. So every time there's a sign change, there's a first house, 12th house, there's like kind of like a, not necessarily a domino effect, but there's kind of like a something of like a backflip effect, or there's something like a I don't want to say slinky effect. There's just something of like a topsy-turvy effect, because we took everything that we were to like, we put action in our character development per the new moon and the new sun, and per that action we have more or less of a chance to exalt that. I say a more or less of a chance because all the other dynamics and variables that are in effect, we can only exalt and know ourselves so much, because everything is a process. So it's like I'm like still like honoring like all of the, you know, all the other beings and grahas for what they are, you know, and I'm shifting out of the duality biased misinterpretations of how not necessarily the ego is doing it, but the toxic, disinformative, confused mind is looking at the planets how they're looking at it. Because we are all like, honestly, everybody is, you like, you are all of the gods. All of the gods are you. That's the paradox. That's the thing that people aren't understanding. Like all the gods, all the chakras, all the organs, they're within you. So it's like we could lean towards like, I'm this personality, I'm this archetype, but on a micro different context level, everybody is all like, or not necessarily directly all of the planets, but they are of all of the planets, you know? So all of us are, you know, that, you know, to some extent, we are all that, you know, Surya, you know, we are all that sun, you know, we all have that, you know, that new personality, and how that our own individual Surya, our own individual personality, it's always in, it's in like, it's like the solar energy to like put the solar energy into the physical body, the fifth house, and that fifth house goes to the first house more or less, depending on the conditioning and the stages of, and the processing of awakenings on an energetic level, on a rudimentary level, not comparing myself with anybody else, mind you, and just seeing like how it's indubitably and inevitably something of a introspective personal process. So it's a personal process. So like, so we have a chance to see where our personability, not our personality, where does our personability land when the sun is in the new moons? Because when the sun is in the new moons, that is our chance to bring, on a physical basis level, it's our chance to bring like, you know, our like organic character development process within that new moon. And within that organic character development process, we have a particular type of personability, and within that personability, everything has a shadow that's not good or bad, and everything has a not shadow. But the thing is, the intelligence of the earth is they don't necessarily know the shadows are simultaneously being used for quote unquote good and bad as it is. You know, no judgment against anybody. These are just the pure mechanics of the energies. So within saying that, and this is just an off the cuff one, mind you, and everything has its own like spiritual reasonings. I said reasonings. Um, everything has its own spiritual reasonings, and it's up to you to decrypt and decode and that if you are so like you know, cognitively and intelligently fortunate enough to do so within the time that we have within our lives left. You know, the paradox of it being something of like something of eternal and, you know, fixed time limits, you know, like we yeah quote unquote we are like limitless, but the paradox we have to realize is there's also limitation as well. But just to get back to the off the cuff astrology is in like when the planets are in a certain constellation, they're just kind of influencing, and they're it's like something of like a, you know, already is a kaleidoscope effect where that planet is something of like digging into that space energy arena or energy space arena. And this is all like original open source, you know, 8+ years whatever, going towards something deeper than whatever, you know, your obsolete systems are. Because anybody I work with in the future, I'm not about the obsolete shit. I'm just direct like that. And I'm aware of all the personality tests that have been happening since 50 years ago. I'm aware of all of that fucking CIA shit that's been happening underground hundreds of years ago. Like, it's nothing new. The disclosure shit has been happening prominently and more significantly 20+ years plus beyond that, you know. For us to just evolve, particularly with the disclosure movement, it's something else. And how the ironic thing is, people that say that they're about disclosure and they actually, you know, say that they have like, you know, deep disclosure information without the whole picture. It just kind of, that's their own like, that's their own subjective shit, you know. It's mind-boggling how like, you know, it's how they sometimes we just don't see our own subjective illusions. No judgment. But when the planets are in a constellation, we can have the chance to dig into that constellation energy space even more. So within that, you know, Jupiter is in Taurus. So within Jupiter being in Taurus, Taurus is all about really returning to yourself. You know, finding who like finding the harsh reality of like where everybody's at, like where are the individuals at, you know, like what's their case, what's their like mental state, even, you know, what's their like, you know, what's their raw life, you know. Return to yourself, you know, because that's one of the I Ching gates for the Taurus constellation. So it's like return to yourself. So we're having a chance to expand. We're expanding our return. We're having like our own philosophy to return to you. There's all the planets have a different test of their own sovereignty. All the planets have a different test of like a little bit of like their own like, you know, niches, you know. They all have their own unique tests and their own overall test. But I would say like this Jupiter right now, the Jupiter test is like how are we returning to our sovereignty, just in like this like astronomical context, you know, because Jupiter is in the Taurus constellation. So that's meaning like, you know, the philosophy of yourself. For that's a particular type of sovereignty, the philosophy of yourself. Because but that's not the total sovereignty. That's just all the planets are just giving us a piece of sovereignty, and we're in the test of the planets respectively. So within that one piece of the sovereignty, you know, thing, you know, the sovereignty challenge or whatever you want to call it. For us to count the blessings on a neutral level, we get to see how we just get to like have the cognition to have like, you know, have our own unique code pretty much. So we're having our own unique code, and that's being more or less, you know, on a forefront casually within the masculine admin cadmin body, third house Taurus to first house Pisces, and that cycles into you know, Gemini, you know, third house to third house, you know, because the feminine admin cadmin body is third house Gemini. So it's like the Taurus is going to the Gemini because it's first house Pisces, first house Aries. So within the Taurus going to the Gemini, we're expanding ourselves for our own inner communication. Like we're seeing the raw reality of like, you know, this because I look at Taurus as like, you know, politicians creating like, you know, low key like, you know, really unique narratives for like, you know, things to happen, you know. And we're just getting the feed on like, and that's we're just getting like, that's what the communication is always going to be the communication stream of intel, of life's intel, astrology intel, war intel, whatever the fuck it is. The intel is always going to be a thing, but how it's evolving, there's a particular nature in how it's evolving within the astrology, and within the astrology it's evolving. Third house, Jupiter and Taurus, we're returning to ourselves. We're seeing how everybody could get a chance to return to themselves, more or less, and how they're doing it is looking at the planetary stack of like how that kind of aligns with other things, you know, because when a planet is in a constellation space, it's really digging into each other. So it's like, and I also look at Uranus as just human origins, like above all, you know, like we could say all these things about planets, but on a direct like nature, on a real like spiritual nature level, if you do your research, like you would like know what I'm talking about. You know, Uranus is just like, this is just the human origins and the human like pretty much like the human evolution on a different prominent level. But we would have to go there in like, if we're fortunate enough to like have a glimpse, because it's not like, you know, it can be more so about just memories too, you know. And for some reason I'm getting like a Sunday vibe. I know it's Saturday, but because we're all on our own, like everybody's on their own clock, you know. And I think I said that in the past too. So we're all on our own clocks. So within the masculine admin cadmin bodies, the energies having their own forefront and their pursuances, that masculine admin cadmin body filters and recycles subtly to the feminine admin cadmin body. And on the underground, I explain it like way more detailed. So if you're confused right now, you would have to like, you know, inquire and subscribe and like subscribe to see how like you could there could be like a, you know, a fair exchange and a fair work trade and whatnot. And there's something I said that I wanted to bring back up, which was I'm not about like, you know, I recognize the obsolete shit and I'm like I'm transforming it, you know. That's and I'm being neutral, and and a miracle here is like I recognize people's hate, I recognize people's confusion, I recognize people's tribulations, I recognize people's suffering, I recognize people's frustrations, I recognize people's disgruntlements, and emotional and spiritual boundaries is you have a chance to receive insight to change that for the better, and may you not project that onto anybody, and it won't be projected onto anybody else if they have emotional boundaries, you know. So it's like there's a cost There's a sacrifice, a particular sacrifice for you to get your emotional boundaries. Something else might have to be like, kind of like sacrificed, or something like, something like the teeter totter has to be like a certain oscillation, shift, switch, turn mechanism, junction effect has to be initiated, or is like affected and transitioned. Because like if you want, like, it's kind of like it's kind of like it's kind of like Pokemon. It's like, what are you going to start with? Are you going to start with Squirtle? Are you going to start with Charmander? Are you going to start with Bulbasaur? Somehow, are you going to start with Pikachu Yellow Edition? So within all of that, you're picking a certain specialty at the cost of the other three. You're going to have to catch up with those other three later. That this is astrology for kids now, we're like our prominent energies, we're a certain element, and we sometimes that element gets like, sometimes we need more of our element because our element gets challenged, but we also need the other elements. So within that, it's like, say I start off as something like, the air sign, okay, intellect's there, but like within the intellect, okay, emotional boundaries are getting like, a thing. Now I'm choosing to go to quote unquote Squirtle, end quote, at the cost of, I started off as quote unquote Pikachu, right? Air, lightning, whatever. I started off as Pikachu, just metaphorically. And since I started off as Pikachu, like, for some reason, Pikachu is not getting appreciated, So now he has to like go to Squirtle. He has to like find the emotional boundaries. So since he's going to Squirtle, he might be lacking Bulbasaur and Charmander just for the emotional boundaries. So if you choose to work on your emotional boundaries, it might be at the cost, neutrally, standardly, within just the mechanics of energy, it might be at the cost of a luxury of, your passion, the luxury of your stability, and somehow the family is more or less tied to that. It might be at the cost of like, your intellectual pursuit, and all of those four, they're intershifted within each other. And that was the pre format to even astrology in itself, because there's three modes to all the elements, water, Pisces, Cancer, Scorpio, etc. So within the emotional boundaries, if I started off as Pikachu and now I got Pikachu and Squirtle, okay, I got emotional boundaries, I got intelligence, and that intelligence is telling people in the future, like, with the intelligent grace, I'm comfortable saying, like, in professional maturity, I'm recognizing the obsolete shit. I have my own emotional boundaries, and I get to choose who I get to work with, or to some degree, right? Because I'm still like trying to download the whole no choice thing, right? But anyways, me recognizing all of that, if I recognize all of that, all other people's their shit that's not mine, then you would have to work with quote unquote Squirtle, end quote, metaphorically speaking. You would have to, and there's I talked about, I used this example a long time ago offline in a different way, and who knows how it will be, shared in the future, and the future is an illusion, paradoxically, because somehow the future is preserved somewhere else. God's heaven is after AI. We know that. And God's heaven is intervening within AI and the past within his miracles. And that's the biggest challenge. How do we get to resonate with God's heaven or not? Like, I'm like neutrally, I'm just like super neutral at this point. But like, for me to recognize everybody's stuff, it's that's because I have got a chance to work with my own emotional boundaries and intelligence. So I feel comfortable, and hopefully I can say it professionally mature. I recognize the obsolete shit emotionally, within physically or tech wise, you know, mentally, and even like you know, quote unquote, okay, and even quote unquote like culty wise, end quote, you know, because the fire, it's like the fire, that's sat, that's like what, you know, standard, because we're all the signs pretty much, obviously, but like, you know, I look at, and they could be used so many different flavors. You know, Sag is just like the organization. It's the creed, pretty much. Like the fire, like the Aries. That's just like that's like the creative passion of the kid. You know, metaphorically, you know, or like esoterically, because I'm not trying to call any Aries kids. You know, I'm just looking. I'm like trying to transform this shit. And then Leo is just kind of like this like this like this kind of Olympian, or not necessarily that, or something like a sculptor, you know, or something that's being sculpted, you know, something that's being like the creativity is being focused for you to like be your own shit or self, you know, like, so it's like it's like the thing that's being like kind of sculpted, like, or even like a performance being like refined, or like something being refined, you know, you know, so, like, you know, the creative project being refined. So within all that fire, sometimes the fire has to be, you know, kind of put on a quote unquote pause, end quote, because we have to work on other things, but it's still there, you know, in the backdrop of things. And let me check my battery real quick. Okay, battery's good, because I don't want it to like flop out and just be like, oh man, lost this one. So I transitioned to the fire because I'm just recognizing you know, how we get to use these elements and these planetary tribulations to indubitably perhaps go towards God's heaven or not, because where your fire is, that's what you have esoterically agreed with and resonated with, and now you're fulfilling and living out your esoteric contracts. There are no mistakes in a intellectually refined level. There are no mistakes. We're living out our pre-resonances, and the pre-resonances are unfolding. Karma isn't just mental or emotional, it's energetic as well within the underground podcasts. Shout out to that. We're living out our resonances and they're unfolding. There are no mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. But like the human might cringe, might have malice towards that, because it doesn't see the energy mechanics behind it. We're unfolding and unpacking our pre-energy resonances into what we esoterically agreed to throughout the lifetimes. That's what's happening. And now, more or less, we're either choosing to lean towards our instinct to do the balanced thing, not good, not bad, the exalted constructive principle, to get out of distortion and detriment, like energies and phenomena and yada yada yada. That's what's going on. It's going beyond the metaphysical toxic duality. Energetically, you could call that quote unquote evil, end quote. But it's not evil per se. But it quote unquote could be, end quote. So I'll probably title this video the Sovereign Puzzle, maybe. I don't know. But within a more masculine, within energy masculine approach, the ninth house is in Scorpio, so like we could get intellectually mature with just seeing all of this, like how the experiments have gone pretty haywire, you know. Ninth house Scorpio. Experiments have gone haywire. Yeah, we all have desires. How are we approaching those desires? And as we're approaching those desires, what level of awareness do we have to actually fulfill and balance those desires? Ninth house Scorpio. Because even if you're in desire mode all you want, there's still other shit that's happening in the world that is more or less going to wind down, and it will more or less kind of like interact with you in the future. It'll spiral to you more or less in the future. All the other themes of how all the other aspects and themes of the quote unquote energies and the planets, end quote, they have their own level of maturation that we're growing into. We're going back into, and our human life has resetted from that. The future is the past. 2012 shit. So within this ninth house Scorpio, 12th house Aquarius, think like every time the first house, every time the sun changes signs, it's like it's like the 12th house and the first house, they're kind of having like a figure eight effect, more or less, in a subtle masculine feminine dynamic. Every time the sun changes houses, there's like a figure eight effect, because it's the first house then becomes the 12th house in a different astrological dynamic framework. So now, like on a 12th house framework, what we've taken action towards and what we had a chance to exalt our personability with, it now has resetted and recycled more or less. In one slick context, it has went to the dragon's tail, you know. It has went to Ketu, you know. You could say Ketu is like subtly exalted in the 12th house, respectively, and you could say Rahu is subtly exalted in the first house, respectively. And then some people say like different planets rule the south node and north node. All of them have their own unique affiliation and combination with all of it. You know, that's astrology in itself. It's the unique energetic dynamic configuration of the energy differentiation in movement effect. So this is an off the cuff one. So within this ninth house Scorpio, it's like we all have desires, no shit. But like, how are you gonna approach those desires with an awareness within the wars that are happening? You know, it's ninth house Scorpio. It's ninth house Scorpio, and then 12th house Aquarius. It's like everything that we've worked on last month. It has been kind of like the mail. The letter has been put in the mailbox and it's being sent off, you know. It's being sent to, like, you know, quote unquote the divine mother and the divine fathers, you know, the sun changing signs, the masculine admin cadmian body and the feminine admin cadmian body, they being different, doing different functions, but simultaneously intertwined, and simultaneously not intertwined. And the not intertwined part is the intertwined part is the 12th house is now in Aquarius. So since the 12th house is in Aquarius, now we get to see what we've what is like kind of like what's downloading, you know. Now it's like Aquarius is downloading, where like 12th house is something of it's like a feminine download, and that feminine download, that's like something of a feminine foundation to our evolution. And that feminine foundation to our evolution, it's really Aquarian like. So we're kind of like, we get off within like the stimulation of the imagination, 12th house, and the stimulation of the imagination. It's within how, you know, humanity and your associations at large could partake gracefully, you know, perhaps, you know, feminine evolution, Pisces, 12th house, Aquarius is in the 12th house in the masculine admin cadmian body dynamic. So within that, we're kind of like depositing the Aquarius energy within the 12th house. So we're using the society at large within this Pisces new moon to fulfill our, you know, our collective quote unquote fantasies, end quote, our collective, you know, creativity, quote unquote, our collective, you know, dream rebuilding or whatever. That's what the 12th house Aquarius is, and the 9th house Scorpio is not. And I'm pinpointing the 12th house and the 9th house because that is that is the house of Jupiter. So those are the Jupiter houses. So within that Jupiter house, Jupiter's like, he's like low key one of the main material bosses and etc. You know, because I recognize the spiritual personalities for what they are, and I'm like transforming the perception of that as well. So within that, so I'm just seeing like, since it's new moon Pisces, then we have to see like how the 9th and the 12th house, like what's really hidden for them, you know, or what's really like, you know, inhabiting and inhibiting them. Because on the collective pursuit, that's the constellations, you could say they're prominently more like downloaded within the 9th and the 12th house, since it's like new moon Pisces and Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces. So if Jupiter is the ruler in the Pisces, he's having deposits within his constellations, and he's having withdrawals from his houses, and the withdrawals he's making from his houses is 9th and 12th house. 9th house Scorpio, 12th house Aquarius. So within this Aquarius, it's like you could just see like, where is your Aquarius and where's your Scorpio, pretty much in a certain unique dynamic. And within seeing your Aquarius and Scorpio, you could see how you could just, you know, how it's leading to Scorpio being your dark emotional boundaries, and Aquarius being your dark society character, respectively. And this has already been a thing, you know. There's nothing like, there's, you know, quote unquote, there's nothing new under the sun, end quote. So it's like within that, like Jupiter is seeing like how we're like doing that, you know, how we're that's like the raw ass test. That's the raw test. It's like, and that will be like that will be like kind of like, you know, tribulated throughout our lives. So you don't gotta see my ragged this, because I do a lot of working out, and it's like, oh, you want. But let's see what time. 38 minutes. Whatevs. Yeah. So it's like all of the gods are the chakras within you, and in a more mature, spiritual, intelligent, spiritual, mature level, none of the gods are necessarily better than each other. They're all playing their own function. So for the planets to like dig into a constellation from their vantage point and their aspect point, then we could see how we're also getting a particular type of influence from that element, you know? So for like Jupiter to trine Pluto, wow, that Earth, the Earth within the system, the whole system of the society drastic change. No shit. Let me take a breath. Because I know some people could be like, oh, this guy's getting long-winded. So like within like, you know, a Trinity combo, that's like creating fire. That's creating like propulsion. That's creating like precision. That's like pinpointing something. And within that pinpointing, refinement is taking place within the element. That's the trines. Refinement within the element, perhaps within the human, or perhaps with the project, or perhaps with, you know, the terraforming of a planet even. Because like, shout out to Ernest, you know. But people like, but we pretend to not care, or toxically we don't care. We don't know we're more or less going to that, and we don't more or less know how to balance towards going towards that as we transition. So the toxic GMO, I don't give a fuck, that's really not like that's really not relative. That's really not like, it's not conducive. It's not more intelligent. But so as we're pinpointing and bringing precision to Earth, we could have a chance to bring precision to Earth in a particular way if there's a big death transformation happening within some type of Capricornian region connecting to the Bhu Mandala. The Bhu Mandala, that whole system change, there's a big system change within the Earth dimension, the Bhu Mandala. There's a system change, and Pluto being in a particular space in Bhu Mandala, and he's connecting to Jupiter in some type of Taurus constellation in one context. Because obviously I could see how like people could like, you know, go beyond astrology. I could see that as well, you know. So within that, we could have precision to how we could move with how the Bhu Mandala is being transformed, and how the material spaceships and the material vehicles, you know, Taurus, Virgo, Aquarius, and Gemini. Because you could say like Capricorn and Libra, like they're like, there's a certain type of premise in the Bhu Mandala, and how the prominence of like, you know, Capricorn being in just like the raw Bhu Mandala, the raw Earth itself, and then on an esoteric level, Libra being like some type of casual diplomacy and change from the Capricornian Bhu Mandala scape. So that square of Capricorn and Libra, they're doing a particular esoteric thing, and how like, you know, and how casual diplomacy is being made from the early esoteric origins of the terraformings of the early, you know, esoteric perspective of what the Capricorn constellation really is, respectively. And we're all the signs, you know. I'm not saying like, oh, but like you take it how you will, you know, take it how you will. We're all prominently some signs more than other, but we're still all the signs, you know. Let me see. Okay. So within that, we have a chance to pinpoint how we could have our own like way of, and it's already a thing. We have our own way of life within you know, kind of like, you know, the quote unquote techie side of life, end quote. You know, the kind of like the material objects of life, you know, this Taurus thing, you know, we're having our own relationship with material objects. And as we're having our own relationship and our way about of going, how we're like interacting with material objects, that's having a unique transformation. Pluto trine Jupiter. And that's being like, you know, casually expanded and contracted on its own esoteric energy. Jupiter, you know, has its own ins and outs, ins and outs, ins and outs, ins and outs. Excuse me, because I try to be as pronunciate and renunciate and literate as I could be. And within that, in a different note of synastry, to complete that trine, compensation astrology, my Instagram has a bunch of gems, whatever, you know, fair balance in the future. You know, to complete that trine, we could see like how we all have our own Virgo energies, and we all have our own like Virgo relationships or whatever, you know, like, meaning there's a synastry where Virgo is in effect from the individual or from the groups or from, you know, just the planetary effects. So within that compensation astrology of synastry, to complete the trine of Pluto in Capricorn, Jupiter in Taurus, we could complete it with like, you know, just kind of being practical and mutable and analytical and logical, and, you know, kind of moving and adapting to structurability. And sometimes I look at Virgo as like feminine control. You know, I need to have it this way. You know, I need to lean towards this way. It has to be like this. It has to be this way, respectively. We all have that, but like maybe like they're inclined to act on that more based on, you know, their astrophysiology or whatever. Because on a neutral level, that's what the humans are. We're a product of astrophysiology. Why do you think the chemical cell salts are in effect? And I did an underground, like I have like the content, like I have just as much as like quantity as like any other content creator. I'm gonna tell you that right now. I just don't put it on blast. And if you think I put it on blast, well, fuck it. That's not necessarily accurate. Like, because like eventually everything that we ever claimed, we will follow up on it standardly. You know, it will be followed up. It will be followed up on. Let's sit back down. I like walking. So, 100% juice. I just saw something. I just saw like a little receipt that said that. So I was like, whoa, it's a lot of juice. That's some good juju. That's some good Jew. Yeah, shout out to all the good. Shout out to all the good juice or whatever. But people are people, you know. There's good in every. I'm not racist. There's good in every race. There's toxic psychosis in every race. So for a new diplomatic platform, we have to have a discernment within. It's not about race, but there is toxic psychosis susceptible to go into any race. So without being racist, could we see the toxic psychosis within beings without having to get racy about it? But if they're getting racy about it, they're trying to use that card so they could get racy about them denying their own toxic ass psychosis traits, because it shouldn't be a racist thing. If you're a toxic psychosis, like, you know, something's wrong with you and you're fucked up in the head and you're trying to use race to get out of that, but you're still doing something illegal, then why is it that you get it? Why is it that people get to commit crimes, but they get to get away with it? You know, and like, so there has to be a more fair justice system, you know? Like there has to be a casual diplomacy system that discerns, like, are you doing illegal crimes? and recognizing that the race card shouldn't work anymore. It's not about race. It's about bringing awareness to bring race equality and seeing the reasons on how to go about that so that could be achieved, and not getting caught up in the mindset and the thought forms of being racist. And at the end of the day, it really just comes down to like if you're brave or not. And if you're not brave, you know, like the gods fucking see that shit. I really don't give a fuck about people's ignorant misinterpretations towards me, their ignorant train of thoughts, their ignorant, you know, what they've gotten themselves into in their affiliations, and just their ignorant energies. I'm not into any of that shit. So I could get more astrology with it too. My battery's good. I mean, everything, like eventually we get to a point where everything could be on course, right? Quote unquote. My IG 2018, all systems go, end quote. It kind of is like that though sometimes, you know, like the energies, you know, and who knows if Ernest is prominently putting that forward, all systems go, but whether he is promoting that particular energy or not, that energetically will still get challenged from his vantage point to the earth, and from his vantage point to the earth there's particular layers of in between planets and constellations. It's a particular in between. So let's see, where am I at? So yeah, I think I'm like kind of satisfied. Like I could still roll with being more astrology with it, but when you feel it's kind of like complete, it's kind of like complete, you know. Yeah, so I would just say like, you know, honor like, you know, the Jupiter challenge. You know, see where your first house is at, and you know, see where like what obviously like it's already a thing, you know. Shout out to like all the predecessors. See what element like you need to work on. No shit. Thank you very much. Have a great life.